much talked about Sandy Hollow Maryvale Railway. Could you give me an inclination of...
Yes, well, they've been general discussions. We've been charged by the government with presenting a report to the government on the feasibility of completing the Sandy Hollow Maryvale Railroad, or as it's, I think in Newcastle it's better known as the Newcastle Dubbo Railroad. And having been to Galgong on the 7th of March this year and listened to submissions from the people within the area of influence, we undertook then, and in any case had decided, to come to Newcastle to listen to the points of view of the local businessmen at this end of the railroad, to hear what they thought the influence might be on Newcastle as a port and as an industrial centre, and alternatively what they thought might be the influences inland in the general area of influence of the railroad.
If this railroad is ever completed, how will it affect Newcastle?
The Newcastle opinion is that it could have quite a dramatic effect on Newcastle, both as a port and as an industrial city. Now, in the light of information we have already got from head offices and government departments of those basically concerned in Newcastle, we've come here to discuss these matters with the representatives of those companies and the government departments, and it's quite obvious that there's a lot to be said for the railroad on the face of it. We've got to study all this information that we've gleaned on this trip, that we've had in the past, put it all together, weigh it carefully, and come up with a recommendation to the government from that.
And how long do you think this recommendation will take to be made?
Well, we are called upon by the government to hand over a preliminary report next month. Now, we're confident that we can give them a report. It may lack some of the vital detail, which would then hold it up in the government's hands, but we certainly can give them a preliminary report next month.
Now, going back to ports, has the corporation received any inclination of deepening Port Stephens to become a deep water port?
Not as a corporation. We've certainly discussed this in all its aspects, both from one of our main charges, quite apart from the current railroad investigations, of state development. New South Wales is in need of deep water port facilities. This may come from Botany Bay, but Port Stephens is put up as an alternative deep water port to handle bulk cargoes. It may be in the long run, in the light of information we have at the moment, that if the Sandy Hollow Maryvale Railroad was completed and quantities of wheat particularly came through this area to the extent they might, then it would be necessary to develop Port Stephens in order to take the bigger ships, the 100,000 tonners and beyond that are now talked about, and in some cases on the job, because it's felt that Newcastle, particularly the rock bar at the entrance, may present too many difficulties in developing Newcastle to handle that size of ship.
So in the future, all the wheat handling facilities that have been built here could go to Port Stephens to load these ships if it became a reality.
Yes, but this is looking a long way in the future, and I don't think there's any question that the current facilities in Newcastle, which are absolutely first class, will be more than sufficient for very many years to come.
Mr. Urquhart, thank you very much. Amid the movement of these VIP visitors, the Hunter Valley Research Foundation released its latest statistics on the Port of Newcastle, and the figures show that works recently undertaken in and around the port have been timely. But what about the rock bar at the harbour entrance? Will it continue to be a thorn in the port's development? A person who has been studying the port's development is Mr. McKeldin of the Hunter Valley Research Foundation. Mr. McKeldin, has the Port of Newcastle reached its saturation point, or will it be reaching its saturation point in the near future?
Well, I think there are really two issues involved here. One is the depth of the bar, the limitation and draft of the vessels you can enter, and the other is a matter of congestion of port facilities. Now, the bar has been deepened steadily over the years from 26 feet to present 36 feet at low water, and it's planned to extend this depth right through to the major berths over the next year or so. Another problem is actual congestion of the facilities. And so you can only have one ship tied up at a berth at a given time. And the quicker you can get this ship loaded or unloaded and out again, the quicker you can bring in another one. Now, most of the development around the harbour has been aimed at speeding up the turnaround time for ships. For example, we have just brought into service a new coal loader which can handle 2,000 tons of coal an hour. This is compared to the old system whereby each truck was individually hoisted and emptied into the ship's hold. Again, bulk grain loading facilities are being developed and will be in operation within a couple of years. This will have a similar effect on the loading of grain from the wheat silos. At Walsh Island, bulk unloading facilities for superphosphates have been brought into operation. So that these innovations will speed up rapidly the turnaround time for ships, and so probably avoid congestion in that sense for a long time to come.
About how long would this be, you know, the next 20, say 30 years or to the turn of the century?
Well, it's very hard to be a prophet in these things. It's likely that general cargo will become containerized in the near future. And you may have noticed down at the Salisbury Basin at the moment they're developing new wharves. These have been designed specifically for containerized type traffic, that is, traffic where goods are carried in large containers and these are offloaded in one go. This saves an immense amount of time.
And with these ships too, the ships are also getting quite larger and larger too.
Surely this has been a steady trend. As I mentioned in the press release, the average size of ship has doubled over the last 10 years entering Newcastle. And of course, overseas they're developing super carriers. Now, of course, these would never be able to enter Newcastle at any time. But the ships which are coming here are certainly getting larger and more efficient and more sophisticated.
Well, apparently when the larger the ship gets, the more problem it will have of turning around in the harbour too, won't it?
Yes, certainly. Some of them may have to back out, but I don't see this being a problem for some time, because the limitations on depth will be the first one to come into operation.
And this more or less points to the fact that we'll more or less have to develop another deep-sea port closer to Newcastle or somewhere else. Is that correct?
Yes, if we wish to handle very large ships. The draft a ship requires varies roughly as the cube root of its tonnage. So if you increase the size of ship 8 times, you double the depth of water it needs. If we do want to handle very large carriers, then certainly we'll have to look elsewhere for a deep water port.
Let's explain it very easily. We handed over, at the Commonwealth's request, we handed over our taxing powers over income, private and company, as a wartime measure to help equality of sacrifice. It's called uniform taxation. The understanding was that we'd get our taxing rights back 1 year after the war. They were never given back. But we were assured that we would get a fair reimbursement grant each year to compensate us for the loss of our taxing rights. Now, what's happened is that we are not getting back anywhere near the amount we would be getting if the income tax had been coming to us. In other words, the income tax increases are going to the Commonwealth, this is simplifying it, and we're only getting a small share of it. So the Commonwealth is able to spend up on its own expenses, and we've got to scrimp when it comes to things like education and health and roads and housing and all the rest of it.
You're not trying to make advances at the expense of any other state, then?
No. We believe that we get a very poor deal by comparison with the other states. But this is not our main problem. If we approach it on that angle, it will split the states all over the place. We approach it from the angle that New South Wales wants a fairer deal. And if we're getting a fairer deal, we don't care if the other states do a bit better.
What are you going to do about it now?
Well, we're having a meeting of the Premiers on October the 4th, and that, I think, will be a prelude to strong representations, I hope united representations to the Commonwealth, for a complete review of all financial arrangements between the Commonwealth and the states, to give the states what every Australian calls, and I think deserves, a fair go. We're not getting one now.
But do you think that the Commonwealth can afford to give you more money?
They are giving $1,000 million to help, over the next 3 years, to help the natives of New Guinea and Papua. And we want to see this help up there. But by goodness, if they can give $1,000 million to help in New Guinea, they can give a few $1 million to help the children of New South Wales schools and the sick people in our hospitals. And it's as simple as that.
In other words, then, the Commonwealth might have to raise more money by taxation to give you what you want if they're not going to reduce their existing commitments in defence and other matters.
Well, they can do a little bit of rearranging. For instance, they're spending $60 million on the Ord River scheme, primarily to grow cotton. And we're growing all the cotton that Australia wants, all the raw cotton, in the Namoi Valley. We'll be looking for export markets before long, the way they're growing it up there, and it's the best cotton in Australia. It's supposed to be the second best cotton in the world they're growing up there in the Namoi Valley. Why spend $60 million on growing it up there in the wilderness in Western Australia? That money could be spent on schools and hospitals.
Do you feel that there's anything strange about a Liberal state premier attacking a Liberal federal government in this way over finance?
No, I am a pretty serious-minded person. I'm elected to be the premier of this state and to look after the welfare of this state and all the people in it, whether they're Liberal or Labor or Calathunkin. And I fight for this state whether I've got to kick the shins of the federal government if they're my supporters or not. I'm going to stick up for New South Wales.
Do you think this shin kicking is going to do you any good? Have you got a real arguing point?
I'm sure it's going to do a lot more good. It's getting some results.
excuse me, sir, you think that these tours are worthwhile?
Unquestionably. I can't see how they can do otherwise than succeed. This is done overseas, particularly in California, where one vineyard about 90 miles from San Francisco has 90,000 visitors each year. They sell wine at the door, and selling wine pays for the operation. This goes on continuously. Of course, they've got a much bigger industry than we have here, but there's no reason at all why it shouldn't succeed here.
Have you got any ideas of how this could be boosted along a bit?
Well, there's always publicity in the periodicals and in the newspapers, and when the wine consumers associations and other people get to know, all their members will want to come. I'll be pleased to be here to see them.
I think this is a wonderful way to show the public where wine's grown, and I'm quite sure that these tours will be an enormous success.
After all, these vineyards are the oldest in Australia, and their close proximity to Sydney lend themselves not only to the people of Australia but to people from overseas. And there is no doubt that the wines grown in this particular part of Australia are outstanding as far as both red and white wines are concerned.
These outstanding wines of the Hunter Valley should make them really interesting for overseas visitors as well. I feel that these wines produced in this particular region of New South Wales are the foremost wines in Australia, and only through their knowledge of can they become more popular in Australia.
Well, do you think that these tours are worthwhile?
Oh, magnificent. I think there's tremendous tourist potential in these. I hope they succeed, and I'm fairly confident they will.
I was in London last year, and I lectured for the Wine Board to the National Press Club and to the Circle of Wine Writers. They understood that Hunter wines were one of the great wines of the world. They really felt this. They knew a lot about the Hunter, and they really had tremendous regard for the wine. I think that Thunderbird, by doing what they're doing, will be able to get people, international visitors, who've only got a few days in Australia, to get them up here quickly, show them around, and let them see this famous area. You know, it's too tedious today to do it by car for someone who's in a hurry, and I think Thunderbird are doing a great job by getting the people here quickly.
The man behind this idea was Mr. Peter O'Reilly of Thunderbird Aviation. Peter, will these become a regular feature of your service if this is a success?
Certainly, Jeff. We intend to run this as a regular service, bringing the quality and the tourist potential of this particular valley to both Sydney-based people and to overseas people.
And how often will these services come into this area?
We intend to run this type of wine tour at least once a fortnight for at least 6 months of the year, and as the Harvest Festival comes along and the increased activity of the year starts to come into operation, then we feel we'll be coming up here much, much more often, perhaps at least once a week, perhaps twice, sometimes even 3 times a week.
Now, the idea is that the people fly to Cessnock and then come up here by coach, have a look around the vineyards, and then return to Sydney by plane. Is that the...
That's correct. We feel that a 3-hour drive by car and a 3-hour drive back is a long time in a time space of 24 hours. We can do it in 30 minutes. So we feel that they have all the benefit of the actual wine tour without the drudgery of the long drive.
And briefly, what would the schedule be for a day?
Very briefly, leave Sydney around about 10, here about 10:30, then wine inspection of the wine winery, then the vineyard, a barbecue lunch, an inspection of another winery and vineyard in the district, a short tour of the district to show its tourist potential, and then back to Sydney, leaving about 3:30 in the afternoon.
And more or less that you're after the overseas visitor that's only got a few days in Sydney, so this is the market you're aiming for, is it?
Certainly one of the important markets we're aiming for. We are led to believe from the travel agents and also from the wine consumers associations that there are large numbers of people who like wine, who would love to come up during the week or on weekends on a daily basis, not spend 2 days coming up.
Mr. McWilliams, do the Vinurons want this type of tourist to this area?
Yes, Jeff. We believe this area, although it does have a good name now, we'd like to continue that good name and develop it even further for not only Australians to get to know the Hunter Valley as a top wine producing area in Australia, but also all parts of the world.
In other words, that the tourists won't become a nuisance to you?
No, we don't feel they will, because the vintage time itself is only, the really busy time is only over a period of approximately about a month, and even then they will get used to the tourists coming through and they'll carry on their work the same as they normally do year in and year out.
In Wyong, we spoke to Councillor Tim Farrell, who is not only the Deputy Shire President of Wyong, but he's also the President of the Central Coast Industrial Promotion Committee, which is concerned in this matter. Councillor Farrell, here on the Central Coast already you have a fairly rich agricultural industry, you've got citrus, and you've got a very big tourist industry. Now, why do you want to superimpose light industry on top of this?
Well, the main reason, of course, for light industry into the Gosford and Wyong shires is that the younger people leaving school have to go to the cities to find employment. And that is one of the main objects of this Central Coast Industrial Promotion Committee, is to try and induce light industries into the area so as jobs can be provided for the younger people who are leaving school, so that they haven't got to leave their families to go to the city to find other jobs.
Well, it's more a matter of keeping here the people who are here already than going out to attract others in that case.
That's one of the main objects, yes.
Well, now already I believe there are some light industries here. What are they?
Well, we have the Albany Felt, which is set up in Glizero. We have Hobbs clothing factory at Gosford. We have other industries who have indicated that they will be coming to set up in the Gosford and Wyong shires in the near future. We are very happy with that. The results of this organisation, which was set up, say, about 4 or 5 years ago, when we did first set it up, we indicated that if we did get one industry into the area in 5 years, we would be doing well. Well, we have exceeded that, and we are very pleased with it.
And there are prospects of more coming up, I believe.
Yes, more.
Right, now you've been holding meetings throughout the district, and I don't mean just Wyong. I understand that you're interested in any area within the Shire which can provide employment. What's been the reaction by the public at these meetings?
Well, I've been very surprised at the public reaction, especially the last few months, because I've been invited to go to Budgie, Lake Munmora and YE all within the last 6 or 8 weeks. And the interest of the peoples in those areas has been very considerable and very enthusiastic.
Now, generally speaking, industries don't go to an area to suit the area. They go there because they're going to flourish and make money. The keys appear to be adequate power, adequate transport, adequate land. What have you got to offer that which will attract new industries to this area?
Well, we've got practically all those things. We've got power, we've got water, we've got sewerage just about to be put on in Wyong, and then the entrance will be sewage in the near future, but of course sewage is not real necessary. Power, water and land is three of the main items as far as the industrialist is concerned.
Do you provide the right land?
Oh yes, with plenty of land in
Well,
the
this is mainly rural, this area. How do you overcome the state planning?
Well, we have, the Wyong Shire have thought it better not to zone industrial land because when it's zoned industrial, up goes the price, and of course it makes it dearer for the industrialists to buy. We have an undertaking with the Department of Town Planning Department that if we want the land to be released for industrial use, that they will go along with us and help us do that.
Well, now, Cessnock was something comparable to this, and not quite as rural, of course, but they've been pushing for quite a long time for light industry to replace jobs for men who came out of the mines and lost their jobs there. It seems that this is something comparable to it, and the keys, therefore, would appear to be first your promotion committee, and then the Shire Council, and then the Department of Decentralisation and Development. Now, what's going on now to, let's say, twist the arm of this department to recommend to firms that they might come to the Wyong area?
Well, the county clerk from Brisbane Water County Council, who is the secretary of this organisation, and myself will be having an interview with Mr. Butterfield in the near future, and we hope to be able to get the same cooperation and support from the government that other outlying areas are getting.
Are you within the scope of the Department of Decentralisation?
Yes, we come under the 50-25-25.
This is loans?
Loans.
And as far as the industry's established already, have they had adequate loans from the government?
Yes, the loans was supplied for Hobbs tailoring works at Gosford, and Albany felt were looked after by the government.
Well, it looks as though the position's fairly bright if your organisation keeps pushing away at the government to do something for you.
In fact, we are very happy at the present time the way things are going, and we can see a very bright future for the Central Coast area.
Sitting in the middle of Lake Macquarie is an unusual sort of a place to introduce focus, but we've got a couple of rather aquatic items for you this week. The first one's about Lake Macquarie and the fact that, quite frankly, there's not enough water in it. So the local yachtsmen say. The second story is one about oysters, not on Lake Macquarie, but on Port Stephens. Out here, just off Mark's Point, where the channel goes through from the lake proper towards Swansea Heads, yachtsmen are having difficulty getting through because, well, it's just not deep enough. It's a bit cold, but it's certainly not deep. The problem here is that it's what they call a drop over. It's a sand bar that virtually closes off the lake to all but shallow draft water. And the yachtsmen claim that it's ruining Lake Macquarie as perhaps the best boating ground in New South Wales. But that's not the whole story. I have a man here with a yacht fast aground on this drop over who can tell us a little more about it. Meet Alan Buckingham.
one of Lake Macquarie's yacht owners. Tell me, Alan, you're hard and fast here.
I'm hard and fast, all right.
How much water does a yacht draw?
About 5'6".
Well, there was less where I stood up. I guess that it shelves fairly steeply, though.
Oh, yes. There's just nothing here.
How long has this problem existed?
Oh, well, as long as I can remember. We've always had trouble here.
And how did it get the name the Drop Over?
Well, I don't know, but there's no drop over here as far as I can see. There's a bit of a drop out there and a bit of a drop here, but just here there's nothing.
And this is only a few feet off the channel?
Oh, this is about 50 or 60 feet, I suppose.
Is the channel difficult to negotiate anyway?
No, from here down it's pretty good.
In other words, if you can get over this bit, you're right.
It's only the last 50 or 60 feet that we ever have any strife on at all.
What have you done about getting rid of it? Asked the government for help?
Oh, yes, we've asked everybody for help. The government, and we can't get anything done at all.
Doesn't it seem a bit unreasonable to ask the government to spend public money helping, well, a relative handful of yachtsmen?
Oh, well, this isn't the trouble here only. Everything is silting up everywhere in the lake. Weed problem everywhere.
So it's a problem which affects everybody, then?
Everybody's affected by this. There's nobody at all that isn't affected around the lake area.
And why, it stops the tide flow or something?
Oh, well, there's little tide here. Here it's all right, but up around Warner's Bay there's just no tide at all.
And that's why the weeds are growing?
Oh, the weed and silt, and it's the whole foreshore is muddy.
Well, this is it's pretty sandy here, actually, but when you get hard and fast on this, how do you get off?
Oh, well, Hollis comes out and drags us right over on our side, and, right over, you know, it's hard.
Can't do your boats any good?
Oh, it really doesn't. Well, everything's strained when you're going over.
What about the Sydney boys? Do they have the same trouble coming up here?
Well, they used to come here, but they don't come here anymore. For this reason, they just can't get in here.
There's never enough water here. You know, does it vary at all?
Well, it might vary a foot or so, but everybody with anything like this sort of boat, well, we've just got to go over on our side to get in.
Well, what are you doing about it yourself, as individuals or as a club?
Oh, well, we have this sand dredge thing at like a lawnmower.
Where's that?
Oh, it's over at Hollis's.
Well, do you think we can have a look at it?
Well, if I can get off here, we'll have a look at it.
Hang on to this and I'll lend you a hand.
Thanks very much, Roy.
Charlie, so this is your, homemade dredge? What do you call it?
Oh, well, we've christened it the lawnmower. Everybody seems to take that as its name, but it's not for cutting weed, it's for disturbing the sand.
Yeah. How does it work?
Well, we actually tow it behind the boat as it is there, and with it revolving, agitates the sand, and the tide carries the sand away.
Well, who dreamed up this idea?
Well, I think Gordon Chapman got the plan of it, and he gave it over to our club captain, Ivan Irwin, and then it was given to Alan Buckingham and his men to make it up.
And does it work?
Oh, it does work. Only thing, it takes a lot of power to pull it, and we're really battling with the horsepower and the launches we've got to use it with.
So what you're after in the way of assistance really is perhaps somebody to build a bigger one and somebody to provide a much bigger boat to move it.
That's so. If we had more power and a bigger machine, well, we'd have no trouble. We could shift the sand then.
Is it an original idea? Are there any others of these in Australia?
There's none of these in Australia anywhere. We don't know of any others working anywhere at all.
And what's the problem? And if this works, even with your low power, how come you haven't got the channel open?
Well, as I say, with our low power, we can't work it. We've tried it. It's worked successfully, but we're beat for power, really.
Is there enough tide to carry the stirred-up sand away?
Oh, the sand will carry away, but it'd be a long project. I think it could be too big for us, but it would make a big difference.
And so far, this is as far as the club's been able to get, as far as sort of self-help is concerned.
That's right. This is the only self-help we've got, and it's been all done by the club.
Well, what's the next step? Who do you go to now?
Well, I don't know where we're going to go from to now. Where there's no more power in the lake. We can't get any more power. Public Works might come across with a powerful launch.
What do they think of the lawnmower idea?
And one of their men is very interested in the lawnmower idea, and he's out to try and make it work successful.
Well, we'll leave you with your lawnmower, and best wishes to get the entrance fee free for the future. In the meantime, on to our second story. If I can make myself a little bit more respectable, I'll go and join the oystermen of the North Coast at their 4th annual luncheon. Well, that's a pretty good oyster. It ought to be. It's one of the famous Port Stephens oysters. For the fishermen and the oyster farmers in Port Stephens, and not only in Port Stephens, all the way up along the north coast, have had a bad season. Last season wasn't too good. This season didn't start too well. But I have with me a man who can perhaps tell us why. He's Mr. Dick Simons, the president of the North Coast Oyster Farmers Association. Tell me, Dick, what's been wrong with the oysters up your way?
Well, this year the condition has been very bad. I don't think I remember seeing a really fat oyster for probably 12 months.
Well, these are pretty good.
Well, yes, I'd say they've improved in the last month.
Any particular reason for this lack of condition?
No, I don't think anyone knows exactly the reason. I think on the whole the condition has deteriorated in oysters, I'd say 100% over what it used to be.
And is this right throughout New South Wales or only in our area?
Well, I couldn't say actually for the rest of New South Wales. I think it's spasmodic now. I think they come on for a little while and then they go off again. But I think it's either caused by overproduction, lack of food, which amount much to the same thing, or lack of rain.
Not a disease, then?
No, it's not a disease. It's got nothing to do with any disease. So there's no risk attached to it, but the fact is that they don't look as appetizing.
Well, you've had no difficulty selling your crop, though.
Oh, well, that's a strange thing. You see, the demand for oysters has increased much greater than we can, or much faster than we can grow them. So apparently the public don't mind buying them in this condition, although when I say this condition, this is much better than what they have been for the past 12 months.
These are pretty good. Is pollution a problem up your way?
No, we have no problem with pollution in Port Stephens. There's no industries, there's nothing there to pollute the water.
Then after a lean year or two, the oyster industry up our way looks to be in for a pretty healthy period.
Well, I should say so. I see no reason why we should not be. Development may be one.
Well, I was going to ask about the Salamander Bay development, or the proposed Salamander Bay development. Will this hurt the oystermen?
Well, it would. It would all depend on what the development amounted to. If it was, say, an aluminium smelter or chemical works, I would definitely say that it would affect the industry. But light industry or residential development, I don't think would have any bearing.
Shipping as such won't hurt it.
Shipping could create a risk from the oil discharged into the bay. This could be a risk.
In any case, it's going to eat up Salamander Bay, which is a pretty favourite, what do you call it?
Well, Salamander Bay.
Ground?
Yes, Salamander Bay actually is the main spawning ground for not only Port Stephens, but there are a lot of court sticks go to other rivers. It's a feeding ground for the industry on other rivers as well.
Now, there are no other feeding grounds, breeding grounds?
Yes, there are. Across the other side of the bay, on the northern shore of the bay, there are breeding ground, but they are not as reliable as Salamander Bay. I think this is brought about mainly by the fresh water coming out of the lake. The fresh water brings with it, I suppose, a certain amount of silt and deposits this on the sticks, and therefore the sticks do not catch as well. The oysters do not settle on the dirty surfaces. Now in Salamander Bay, it's quite different. The sticks keep very clean there, and there is no problem as far as the oyster is concerned catching on the clean surface. I think probably that is the main reason that Salamander Bay is so reliable as a catching area.
These oysters then are probably began their life in Salamander Bay.
Oh, most probably they did, yes.
Well, whether development affects it or not, let's hope that doesn't deteriorate. These oysters don't deteriorate, because these are beautiful. And on that savoury note, we'll say good night for Focus for this week.
How did the idea come about in the first place?
A number of people in the Sutherland Shire, which, as you know, is the birthplace of the nation, this is where Captain Cook landed, felt that it was time the Aboriginal people were given the opportunity to overcome their environmental handicaps and so go on to higher education. And they formed a local group here with the idea of establishing a hostel where students could be accommodated and where they could go off onto to their local high schools, to technical colleges or universities.
Where do you draw your boys from?
At the moment we have 12 boys here. We'll double that number at the commencement of the 1969 school term, and they come from the country parts of New South Wales.
What are the qualifications that they have to get in here?
Mainly that their headmaster or local referees, if you can call them that, feel that they're boys who have a potential, who, if given a chance, given the right environment and the right encouragement, can go on to achieve something education-wise and so equip themselves for a job in the future.
And have you been able to achieve that in this short time?
Yes, well, this hostel's been open for a year and a half. We have boys in each year of high school, and they're all doing remarkably well. Our lads in the higher school certificate look like taking it off. And it's quite possible that this hostel, in addition to sending boys onto trades courses, will in the near future send them on to tertiary education.
I know it's probably hard to say, but do you think that these boys wouldn't have been able to do this in their home environment?
No one can ever be sure about this, but it's the feeling of the parents in the main that this is a great break for their boys, that they just wouldn't have been able to get over the hump if they didn't have this opportunity to come to this hostel.
Talking about their parents, do you find a change in relationship between the boy and his parents once he's been here?
Our boys are encouraged to write to their parents and maintain this contact, and in addition they go back to their hometown at school holiday time. I suppose there may be a barrier developed. After all, they're living in a very fine atmosphere here. It's a nice building, it's as good as any motel, and it's very different, I suppose, to the homes from which many of them come. There could be a barrier, but I suppose this happens everywhere where people who have had little opportunity previously are given an opportunity. I think, however, the boys from this hostel will set out with some real objectivity about helping their own people. At least we hope that's the case.
Do they have any problems when they come here in adjusting to the hostel way of life?
One of the very good things about the hostel idea is that there's a number of boys from the same race and similar background. They're not cast into splendid isolation. They seem to derive strength from one another. There's 12 here. They have a tradition developing quite rapidly. They're proud of the fact they're Kirinari boys, and they go off to their local high school where their prowess is quite considerable academically and in regard to sport and civic affairs, and so it just doesn't seem to present any problem of adjustment at all since they're here with their mates.
Have you had any failures?
Had no failures. We've had one boy who's decided to leave the hostel, not for reasons of failure. Every one of the lads we have here shows promise, and we're looking forward with keen anticipation to them taking their place in the community as regular citizens, equipped to do the same kind of job as Mr. and Mrs. Everybody.
Well, Mr. Finlay, this is a great day for the motoring public of New South Wales, and it's also a great day for the Department of Main Roads, who have once again presented to the motoring public probably the best piece of road work in Australia. The engineering features of this road, I would say, would be unequalled in the world, definitely in Australia.
Now, the road has in fact been completed ahead of schedule.
The section from Barara to the Hawkesbury River is 2 years ahead of schedule. It was at first intended that a certain portion of this road would be open at this point of time, but the department made arrangements to continue up to Barara. I think it's important to point out, Mr. Finlay, that for the last 3 years we have been spending $460,000 a month, every month, on this section of the expressway. It's about 6.5 miles in length, and the cost is something like $12.5 million. The 3 sections, totaling 16 miles, have cost $28 million, and of course our next project, which we're working on now, is a bridge over the Hawkesbury, and we must have that finished by 1972. And we're also planning roadworks as part of the expressway at Wyong. We'll be bypassing Wyong, and we're going to plan, and we're working upon it now, for a new bridge over Swansea. So I can say quite definitely, without any qualification, that work on the Newcastle Expressway will continue. And I think the fact that the government have been spending $460,000 a month for the past 3 years is a clear indication of our sincerity in this regard.
But the work won't continue for a couple of years. There'll be a break, will it?
Well, we've got to plan this bridge, and of course it takes time. I think it'll be an all-steel bridge, and we've got to make arrangements and plan it, and the department are working on that now. I checked with the Commissioner this morning. He's also working on the projected roadworks at Wyong, and also the new bridge at Swansea. But I just repeat, without any hesitation at all, that work on the Newcastle Expressway will continue as quickly as it's humanly possible to do so.
Have you found any adverse reaction to having to pay 2 tolls?
I've found no adverse reaction at all. For the interest of the people, 82% of the motoring public are using the toll road at the moment. The average daily toll in total is $2,600, and the average usage is 11,500 cars a day. Last Boxing Day there were 26,634 cars crossed the toll barriers, and I'm expecting on this Boxing Day that that figure will be exceeded.
Now, all this money that's coming in from the existing toll road and now from the new one, is it in fact going back into road construction, or is it meeting interest charges?
Oh, it's going towards paying for the loans that have been raised for the building of this road. It's not going into consolidated revenue, and I can give a definite qualification in that regard. But of course, this is a very expensive piece of road work, probably the most expensive in Australia.
In fact, once you get into these other sections, it may proceed quicker and at less cost.
There will not be another section on the Newcastle Expressway as comprehensive with the engineering difficulties as this third section that we've opened today. The biggest fill is 1 3/4 million cubic yards of sandstone. 1 3/4 million cubic yards of sandstone. And as a matter of fact, 4 days, week after week, they were taking away about 26,000 cubic yards of sandstone a day. A fantastic operation, and as I said, definitely unequalled in this country.
I don't want to jump hurdles that I hope won't arise. We've made a submission justifying in very clear terms an increase of 14%. I've got no reason at this stage to anticipate that reasonable people aren't going to agree with it.
Now, you're asking for 14%, which will add roughly $20 per tonne to the cost of steel. Are you not adding to the inflationary pressures within the nation if you get it?
Oh, I couldn't possibly agree that this will add to inflationary pressures. Firstly, the effect of steel as an input into gross national product is commonly overstated. It is not a high input factor. But secondly, we're as concerned about inflation, perhaps more concerned than most other sections of the community. We employ 64,000 people and we have the biggest investment in plant and equipment in Australia of any company. So obviously we have every reason to want to see inflation beaten, but it can't be beaten by short-term measures, overnight measures. It can't be beaten until there's a resurgence of private investment, a lift in productivity. And these are the things that we are seeking to achieve in this submission. There can't be a resurgence of private investment unless there is also an acceptance that reasonable profits need to be made in the private sector.
And one more question, Mr. McNeil. Surely with another steel industry award coming up and so on, you're in danger of this increase being eaten away once again, or will you go back to the Prices Justification Tribunal and ask for still more?
Well, this case rests upon the need to increase the profit margins of the steel industry. Obviously, the case would be eroded if subsequent cost increases were not recovered. Those cost increases, when they arise, will be the matter of a separate notification.
Mr Punch made official today the news that Newcastle's waited so long to hear. Our harbour is to be deepened and it's to be widened as well. In fact, the first tender for more boring in this case will be let next week. This is the government's plan. The area coloured on this map will be deepened or widened or both. This is a darker colour here because it's deeper. It's going to be 58 feet here over the bar to allow for the wave action on the ships coming in, and they're likely to be big ones. This is designed for 120,000 tonners. The area here, which is a uniform red, will be deepened to 15 metres, that's the 50 feet we've been waiting for, and widened, in the case of the channel here, by about a fifth, which will make it a minimum of 185 metres, and in the steelworks channel up here by a quarter, which will make it 170 metres, enough to take the bigger ships. In the basin at the bottom here, which is coloured green, the new depth will only be 13.1 metres or 43 feet. It's more than it is now, except at around the silo wharf, where it will remain at 38, but deep enough at our coal loader to allow 70,000 tonne ships to load to their limit, which they cannot do now. At the head of the channel, the orange area is off the BHP wharves, and the depth there is whatever BHP cares to make it, because they're responsible for this. The timetable, the job will be divided in half. In fact, half the channel will be dug, especially in this area, so that there's no interruption to shipping and so that the new depths can be brought into use as quickly as possible. By 1979 there will be a 43-foot minimum throughout the harbour. By 1981 all the work will be complete. Well, that's the plan, more than $70 million of it at today's prices. It's bound to go up, and the Maritime Services Board loans won't cover it, so Mr Punch intends to cover the rest of it by charging $1 a tonne wharfage on outgoing coal and incoming iron ore. On today's cargo rates, this will net $11 million a year for the next 60 years without any increase in harbour traffic. Because of this $1 a tonne wharfage increase, coming on top of the $6 a tonne already imposed by the federal government on all coal, I asked Mr. Punch later whether this might militate against increased use of the Port of Newcastle.
I don't think so. The decision was made on the $1 a tonne long before the federal budget came down. We had negotiations with the coal companies and with the BHP. They were aware of our requirements well before the budget. I think the $6 is likely to hamper things a lot more than our plan to put it to such good use as deepening the harbour here so that the bigger ships can effectively use it.
And is that the only money that these companies were asked to contribute, or have they put up loans as well?
No, they're paying for it on a wharfage basis, yes.
And the rest of it is coming out of, well, state finances?
Loan funds, yes.
How much, well, obviously it's spread over a few years.
Yes, 6 years. We plan the whole work will be finished by March 1981 to a depth of 50 feet.
The dredging, however, is going to be the major expense,
yes.
And that doesn't start for about 3 years. Is there any guarantee that this is going to come anything near the original 70 million?
Well, we have made provision in the estimates at this stage. This is only an estimate, of course, before any tenders are called. We believe that the figure will vary from that, but not very much. There have been a lot of considerations given already to a reasonable amount of inflation and increased costs, etc. But this is barring, of course, that inflation gets completely out of hand or anything else like that, but providing it is reasonably controlled, that will be reasonably close to the mark.
And can all this be done without hampering the existing operations in the port?
We believe so, yes. This is why, as I mentioned inside earlier this morning, it is really one of the most difficult dredging jobs ever undertaken in the world because the seas are very rough. We're digging out very tough rock, very hard rock indeed, and we must, of course, maintain the use of the port throughout the whole project. We've got to allow the ships to be coming in and out right throughout the program, and this, of course, makes it a much longer and a much more difficult task.
May God bless her and all who say.
You'll be leaving Channel 3? I know it's a bad thing to say, but do you hope to make
music your full-time business? No, what I'd really like to do is end up with my own variety show, so I can sort of incorporate both television and music, which is exactly what I'd like to do. I've got the best of both worlds.
Now, the song you have released, does anybody write old love songs anymore? Do you lament the passing of the old songs?
Yeah, in a way, because I thought songs seem to be getting a little bit too involved, and I think it's good to sit down and think about things, and you can do this on album songs. But I thought that it would be a nice change just to have a song that you could just sort of walk along and whistle, and not have to think about, just enjoy it. That's what I wrote about.
Well, let's have a listen to it.
Right.
Country, if he only realised Canberra now, the double dissolution bills, says just what is in the federal member has a huge area. Thanks very much indeed, Frank O'Keefe. Industrious men who, Frank O'Keefe, ladies and gentlemen of Maitland, is really a vital time in the history of this country of ours. That if we as a system, the whole of the reason for this election is that Mr. Whitlam was not prepared to act as he said he would act in 1970, as he did act in 1974, but as he refused to act in 1975.
Now, usually when you come to some opening, you're able to say, my government has given such and such a sum to it. I can't do it. It's a commercial enterprise. And so accordingly, you would never expect us to do any direct subsidies of that character. But perhaps I can say, you know, just purely in passing, you wouldn't want me to make too much of a point of it, that in this financial year, in the Hunter region, my colleague Frank Stewart, the First Minister for Tourism and Recreation, has made available over $400,000 for sporting facilities, new ones or improved ones, in the Hunter region alone in this financial year. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I now have to... I just tug it down. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I now declare open the EC Close Centre.
Well, obviously there's been a good deal of controversy. There are two points of view. Up to date, the point of view that says leave the bay substantially to be restored by nature has lost out. I think what it demonstrates is the need for, in all these sorts of circumstances, a total impact environmental study by an independent authority in which the people concerned, the residents, can participate in.
This proposed impact study, would you make this the responsibility of the developer or of the local government organisation?
I think ultimately it must be the responsibility of the local government organisation. With this proviso, it must be an independent environmental impact study, and it must be a study in which the local residents, who after all, it's their environment that's going to be affected, they should have the opportunity to present their point of view. Now, since the Minister has called for such a study, and since I think up to 40 organisations have put points of view, I think it's up to the Council and the Minister to abide by the recommendation in that report, whatever that recommendation might be.
Not so long ago we had you up here. Recently we had a Cabinet subcommittee up here, and now we have you back again. Why the sudden interest in Newcastle?
The planning will be separate from the Treasury?
No, I'm not sure what form it'll take. I think the Treasury, as it exists, will form the substance of the new arrangement when eventually it comes into existence.
Well, does this mean, and I don't know whether this is reading between the lines or not, that you feel the Treasury hasn't been doing the job a Treasury should?
No, I don't. I feel it has been doing the job that a Treasury should and a Treasury does, but I think that job has to be a little different from the one the Treasury does. I think Treasury has, as I said the other day, some limited parameters, but within those parameters, Treasury does a magnificent job. It does its job efficiently and well. But I think it has to be broadened, and I think the communications between where it is and other departments have to be improved, and this involves some reorganisation.
If you try and build planning into this, though, aren't you then making a public service department a very political one? Surely planning's a political process rather than a public service process.
Of course it is. The public service gives us the information, we make the decisions.
And you're not happy with the information you've been getting so far?
No, I'm not happy with the information, nor am I happy with the way in which it moves through the relevant bodies that have to deal with it. Changes have to be made to improve, putting it simply, communications, and I think an arrangement of the interrelations of the different parts with each other.
One final question, how long until you can get a planning incorporated into the government?
I don't know. I would first, very soon, as soon as we get authority to do so from this conference, the first people I would discuss it with would be the Treasury itself.
The amendment that was moved was one to secure a full, open and public inquiry into all of the problems associated with the development of a uranium industry throughout the world.
But this was at least a 12-month moratorium on any development.
And it called for a 12-month moratorium, mainly because if you get too far along the road in terms of developing a uranium industry, you get too far along to turn back.
But you must have known before you started that the numbers were against you.
Yes, we obviously anticipate that the numbers may be against us because the whole development of the uranium industry has been surrounded by mystique. There's never been any frank, open discussion and analysis by the ordinary people of the problems of the uranium industry. And I, the same as anybody else, accepted that there were radiation problems with nuclear weapons. But I thought, the same as everybody else, that the development of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes was completely safe. I now find that it's not safe.
Wasn't the upshot of it today?
That wasn't its purpose. The purpose was to secure a full, open public inquiry so the Australian community can become informed about the situation and the Australian community make a decision.
Are you satisfied that this has happened?
No, it hasn't happened. In fact, I'm very disappointed because the majority of conference delegates just simply acted as a rubber stamp for the Prime Minister.
In many respects, New South Wales is more fortunate, say, than Queensland, where 60% of the coal is owned by overseas companies. But I should make this clear. It's not intended that the national government would acquire all the energy and fuel resources in one fell swoop.
I think that was made clear this morning.
That's right. What's sought is a participation on an Australian basis of fuel and energy resources of Australia.
The Australian government has said that it wants to build pipelines. The state government has permitted private enterprise. forecast
Well, I am against those owning the very sinews of our existence. Water, electricity, gas, in this case a natural gas pipeline, they really are assets that belong to the people.
And you forecast a difference of opinion coming pretty...
We will continue to do in other fields that be necessary. However, it must be said, and I said it last July to the State Council of the Victorian AF2, that the economy cannot stand at a time of severe inflation, wage increases greatly in excess of price commitments. Employers are starting to lay off workers because they have become too expensive to employ. Australian companies are losing export markets because our costs have become too high. Australian consumers, in many instances, are buying imported goods because, despite high tariffs, Australian goods are too expensive. We reaffirm our commitment to tax reform, to the provision of cheap and adequate finance for home building, to our opposition to monopolistic and restrictive trade practices. Much has been done in these fields by the government. More needs to be done, more to be done. We affirm our desire to arm the national government with all power and economic activity. We point out in Clause 4 that many of these powers are obtained by referral from the state. In my personal view, that in a period of cost inflation, powers over price and income are not the answer. A price of income power is often a dangerous tool. Prices must provide a level of income sufficient to pay the worker a just wage, and they must generate a cash flow which permits the continued profitability of the private sector. Inflation could not be solved by a harsh and simplistic control of prices. I said at the outset we must come to understand better the system we live in. About a third of our workforce is engaged in manufacturing, predominantly in the private sector. The prosperity of that sector is therefore vital to Labour's plan. I want to outline my views on the development of industry, but first it must be emphasised that profits are essential. I return to my theme of interdependence and cooperation in economic life. It's time for the ALP to say quite clearly and categorically that our socialist objective does not prevent recognition that the basic needs of the Australian people are dependent at this stage of our development on a profitable private sector. Furthermore, the prosperity of an efficient private sector must in effect be by the government. This we prove fit. In today's world, the government sets the general level of each. And I say quite unequivocally, the aim of this Labour government is consistent with our views on monopolistic practices and other antisocial favourable to the quality growth of the private sector. We are unlikely to make progress towards socialism by making the private sector unprofitable, and we have not tried to do so. The final clause, Clause 13, calls for a set of guidelines on foreign investment. The Jackson Committee will be able to assist in this, but in the meantime we must make it clear that foreign investment in Australia is essential if we are to develop at a rate required by Australian workers and consumers. This does not mean that Australia will be owned increasingly by foreign companies. The required rate of foreign investment can be obtained without that. In some areas like coal, gas and oil, it will be kept to a minimum. Where foreign investment is involved in less significant areas, a higher degree of ownership would be acceptable. Where a high degree of foreign ownership exists already, companies will be required to move to a lower level at a reasonable rate. At the very least, all foreign companies should appoint Australians to their board and should be required to disclose their relations with their parent companies and things like limitations on export. The importance of the private sector, because it is there that the majority of workers are employed. But the public sector is even more important than the private sector. The public sector provides the most essential services: defence, law and order, social security, health, water supply, and other similar services. In addition, as I have said, it has to manage the economy as a whole, and in effect it guarantees, at the cost of the community, the efficient private sector and sometimes the less efficient as well.
While we have to accept the significance of the private sector, we can be sure we cannot advance to a better society unless we proceed through the public sector. It must be our purpose to transform the public sector as much as it is to guide and guarantee the private sector. In Australia, the public sector and the public service are capitalist. They accept and apply as much as does the private sector capitalist values and conduct. Not only must the public sector perform more and more essential services and plan and guide the competitive private sector where self-interest and profit dominates, but the public sector must also seek out new values, humane, cooperative and compassionate values, and act in accordance with them. We cannot have a socialist society until we have a society of socialists. We have very few socialists in Australia, and we have an even smaller proportion in the public sector than in the private sector. And when I say socialist, I mean whole people, humane, realistic, undogmatic, generous people who know that men and women are really of equal value and are mainly a product of their way of life and the values that dominate them. And they are people who know that in Australia the most important thing is to change these values and this way of life responsibly and fairly. The situation at the moment then is that some of the more important aspects of the decline in activity are now behind us. And summarising, if we had not taken the measures we did in 1973 against inflation, it's quite clear that inflation could have been 10% or more higher than it actually was. The cost of living could have been 10% or more higher than it actually was. If we had not begun the policy of expansion and regrowth before the September budget, I would think that unemployment today would be over 500,000. Liquidity is freely available and the demand for funds, particularly for housing, is now high. Interest rates, and there's room for growth. I'm not saying that in housing it's high enough, but it's growing fast. Interest rates, which are of course negative in real terms, do not at present appear to be a restraining factor. Imports are declining, and the balance of payment situation, particularly on current account, is strengthening. With the personal tax cuts, including the housing interest deductibility scheme, now being reflected in pay packets, disposable incomes are rising strongly. By past standards, we have given a massive expansionary boost to the economy in the measures taken in the September budget and since then. As mentioned earlier, however, these are not normal times, and we cannot confidently expect normal reaction. There will, of course, be the usual lags, particularly given current high stock levels. The response of the private sector to these moves is complicated by the current state of business confidence.
When a completely different set of circumstances arise, of course we adjust. Of course we're prepared to adjust. But the underlying direction, the overriding objective remains constant, unchanged, unchangeable, to carry out the program, to fulfil the mandate. But don't let's forget that we've always recognised a relationship between the prosperity of the private sector and our ability to carry out the program. We shouldn't get on the defensive about this. We shouldn't think there's something shameful or demeaning about it. There's no sellout involved. Let me quote from the 1972 policy speech. I laid particular stress on this, the relation between our ability to carry out our program and the strength of all sectors of the economy, including the private sector. I said our program, particularly in relation to education, welfare, hospitals and cities, could only work successfully within the framework of strong, uninterrupted growth. No change there. We have to ensure these conditions or else abandon the program. The fight against unemployment and the fight for the program go hand in hand. I find there are frequent complaints on two scores. One is that we've done too much too soon. The other is that we failed to communicate. As to the first, we have to ask which of our achievements, all of them in pursuit of the program and in fulfilment of our pledges, should we have abandoned or deferred? We have in fact deferred some, such as our schedule for the abolition of the means test, but in everything we've done, there's been a clear priority, the priority of greatest need. We've acted urgently because the need has been urgent. We couldn't have delayed in rebuilding the ramshackle structures and systems we inherited. We had to act urgently to clear away the accumulated dead wood of 23 years. And we are doing so. Of course, this upset the vested interests, those who had it so good for so long. I do ask the Labor Party, and particularly at this level of the organisation, those who have responsibilities here, not to become impatient with the legislative processes. Our party was formed because we believed that there were some things that could only be done, that could best be done by parliamentary action. Now, there's no question that the parliamentary system has been held to ransom, it's been distorted in Australia to a worse degree in the last 2 years than ever before. But we must in fact stick to the parliamentary system. We must make it work. We must never let people think that we've lost faith in it, that we believe the parliamentary system is beyond redemption. Representative government is the essence of democracy. The interests and groups who may feel disadvantaged or feel that their privileged position is in some way threatened are, of course, the most articulate, influential and powerful sections of the community. We can't really expect the press to take up the cudgels on our behalf. The cudgels are thoroughly employed in bashing us. And it's a myth that the government has built up its own vast propaganda machine. This is just not true. There must be a limit to the increases of wages which the economy can stand in any one year. Only so much extra can be provided from the growth of the economy or from redistribution of profits. Wage increases beyond such limits must inevitably cause price increases, and thus attempts to improve the living standards by wage claims are frustrated. I believe there is evidence that in recent times wage increases have gone beyond the present limits of the capacity of the economy to pay. We have a very rapid increase in the share of GNP going to wages and salaries. Wage and salary increases have been much greater than the rate of price increase. No reimbursement formula would solve the financial difficulties of the states as permanently and successfully as acceptance by the national government of their railways and of their hospitals. If you take out those two growing burdens, there is no financial trouble that any of the states have. Let me recall that the Chifley government had with the states, all of them, an agreement that there should be free treatment in the public wards of hospitals. It was there from 47 to 53. It can be done again. And I have some fair hope that it will happen with the Labor states and with Queensland. And the other proposition is the railways. Now I know this may be said to be senseless, but there can be no question that Australia's railways would be much more economic, much more modern, much more competitive if they were run as one. Certainly if you had the whole area between Brisbane and Adelaide run as one. And you may say this is centralist. But how are America's railways run? Or Canada's? Or West Germany? To take other federal developed countries. And Don Dunstan and Bill Nielsen, Jim Kent, Charlie Jones and I will be embarking on discussions to relieve the states of the increasing burden, the inevitably increasing burden of railways.
John, in view of the remarks made yesterday and again today by the Prime Minister, what chance is there of unions persuading their members to ease up on wage claims?
I think there is every chance in the world of calling on the trade union members throughout Australia to be responsive to the Prime Minister's call and also to the Deputy Prime Minister's call on the basis that we do get wage indexation. And of course, with wage indexation, we must get tax indexation. And if we are able to achieve this early in the year, I believe that the trade union movement will show a response to this, because
well, that's a salary increase, isn't it?
That's a salary increase, yes, and I think that the workers throughout Australia are looking for some sort of stabilisation of the wage structure throughout the country. We can take, for example, our own members working in the breweries, where we was able to get a $20 increase last July. Now that $20 at this point of time, after tax was taken out of it, they find themselves in a situation where they're now calling for more wages.
Well, you've got a claim in now, yeah.
We have a claim in now.
Are you likely to moderate that if the government can do something about, well, wage indexation and perhaps tax indexation?
Certainly, we would be looking at a situation of modifying all our claims.
Do you think other unions would be the same?
I'm quite convinced. I'm a member of the ACTU Executive. I represent the food groups on the ACTU Executive, and this has been fully discussed at the ACTU Executive level and also at a union meeting of all federal unions.
Do you think that there's a sort of given percentage over indexation that will be permissible for claims?
It's very hard, Murray, for me to go into any percentages, but I think there's certainly going to be something on productivity, and this will have to be taken into consideration after wage indexation comes into operation. But I think the main thing that the workers are looking for in this country today is getting the value back into their pay packet.
When the Liberal Party organisers booked the Police Boys Hall for tonight's rally, they did so with a promise to their supporters that the night of December the 2nd would indeed be a night to remember. So the Hunter Valley Liberals, under the slogan of "Turn on the lights," have literally rallied to the cause. But of course this whole thing does seem a little unliberal. But according to Bob Scott MLC, the whole thing is quite within the imagination.
When you look at people that are wearing shame phrases, shame badges, they always have a dull, lethargic look on their faces. We're trying to get people here tonight to relax, to get them into the type of mood, the type of mind where they can make a basic decision on where this country is going to head during the next 3 years.
But it's very unliberal, isn't it, this type of image?
It is unliberal, but let me say that in the past in Newcastle, I don't really feel that as far as politics is concerned generally, either Liberal or Labor, we've ever had campaigns of this nature. We're a forerunner in this, and I feel that it's not only good for politics but certainly good for Newcastle.
Looking at a number of the people in the audience, certainly a conservative lot of elderly people there. How do you think they will accept it?
Well, Graham, possibly for the conservative elderly types, the blue rinse group of the society, it may be a fast ride.
You've got dancing girls and you've got a group on stage. Is this perhaps appealing to the psychological area of people? Is this perhaps an aim of yours?
We're trying to, stir people up to show them the issues.
Oh, Lord, I want to be that number. Now when Big Arthur goes marching in. Now when the lips
Is the concept American?
Possibly you could say it's American, but I'd prefer to think that it wasn't American. I think they go a little overboard in America. All we have basically is a 6-piece band, a popular Newcastle band, an 8-piece dancing troupe, and basically political speeches.
local government had never been.
There's the area improvement program, which deals with open space and environment and drainage and community centres, libraries. There's recreation. This year, for instance, we're giving well over $500,000 in Bill Hayden's budget for recreational purposes in this Hunter region.
Motorised vehicles or like horse and cart?
Well, we're only talking about strictly weekly wage. Horse and cart is cheaper to run if it's in the close area of the bakery. Costs you practically nothing to run a horse and cart compared to a motor vehicle. But if you've got to run several miles from the bakery before you even start, I'm afraid you've got to go to a motor vehicle and forget horse-drawn vehicles.
So someone like Jack Davies is being forced out both ways?
Yes, he's got an advantage over the motor vehicle in our particular case because he's within a mile of the bakehouse, which is much more economical. But the wages and the drop in bread consumption per house is just making it extremely hard to keep on home delivery.
Oh, just one general question. Is the bakery business going down? Are there many bakers going out of business?
Well, yes. It's becoming left to the big combines and flour control bakeries. In Newcastle, since the war, we've lost about 38 bakeries. We lost 2 fairly big ones last year in Fielders and in Brockmans. There's roughly only 5 of us left in the Newcastle area now.